Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument, hosted by the militant, Marxist, anti-Santa, Martyn Bradbury. The Bradbury Group is streamed live on Rover, Sky TV, YouTube and Facebook. Proudly sponsored by Aotearoa, journalism you can trust. Let the arguments begin.
Kia ora Aotearoa. The true demarcation of power in a late-stage capitalism, liberal, progressive democracy is the 1% richest, plus their 9% enablers, versus the 90% rest of us. And once you see politics through that lens, the left can never lose another election ever again. Welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. I'm your host, the editor of the daily blog, Martyn Bradbury. Bomber to my comrades, Mr. Bradbury if you're nasty. My pronouns are us and we. Coming up on this evening's show, the political panel all-stars tonight are former Labour Party leader and podcaster Phil Goff, business journalist at the Post Dita De Boni, political commentator Matthew Tukaki, and former Attorney General and podcaster Chris Finlayson. Tonight's one-on-one and 10 is co-leader of the Greens, Chlöe Swarbrick. Shout out to Kiwi Skirt and Chewy from BHN moderating tonight's YouTube page. Good evening to all the Bradbury Easters online watching right now. Your comments will appear on screen as we go. Shout out to our Aotearoa Facebook, Rover, Spotify, Apple Podcast and Sky TV whānau. And our Twitter panel this evening is Tim Selwyn. He'll be tweeting live online at Twitter, hashtag the Bradbury Group. Before all that, however, is this week's War on News. Brothers and sisters, last week the New Zealand government paid $6.3 million for the French Michelin star program to rate our posh restaurants. Since the National Act New Zealand First Coalition took office, government funding for food banks has been cut by $20 million. 600,000 Kiwis rely on food banks every single month. We don't have money for starving Kiwis at our food banks, but we do have $6.3 million for the French Michelin star program to rate Queenstown food wank palaces. This image you see in the corner here is one of David Seymour's 3 buck chuck school lunches. How many Michelin stars would you give that garbage? By the way, the school lunch program has been such a diabolical failure. David Seymour was forced last week to dump the worst food provider, the transnational corporation Compass, and has gone back to regional suppliers, which would be hilarious if it hadn't cost 2,000 jobs when he awarded this transnational mega corporation the contract last year. Compass was caught swapping out mince in school lunches in New Zealand for organ meat. When parents complained about the quality of the slop, the Prime Minister told them to go make Marmite sandwiches instead. Less, let them eat cake, and more, let them eat brain tacos. Poverty never tasted so yummy. Talking of poverty, news last week that a new Western values charter school called Ultim Academy was going to open in Wellington, which had us all wondering which guest teachers and lectures we could expect from a Western values charter school. Guest lecturer Damien Grant on why can't white rich libertarians get a break. Guest lecturer David Seymour on Israel is the greatest country ever, and if you say otherwise you're a communist who hates Jews. And guest lecturer Don Brash on I'm not racist, but why do we need a Western values charter school when we already have the National Party, ACT, ZB, the New Zealand Herald and the Air New Zealand Members Lounge? Ultim Academy sounds like Hogwarts if the uniform was all brown shirts. And finally, in this week's War on News, COP30 looks like a complete sellout to the oil and polluter interests. 2,000 fossil fuel lobbyists are there to protect their interests, and they represent a total capture of influence to ensure their profit margins aren't impacted while the planet burns. That's one polluter lobbyist for every 5 environmental advocates. You wouldn't have arsonists represented at a fire safety conference or flat earthers at a geography seminar, yet the people directly causing climate change are somehow allowed to pretend they are part of the solution when they are totally the problem. Brothers and sisters, we're all going to die on a burning planet thanks to the lies of the petro-industrial complex and their polluter mates. To quote the great warrior poet oracle Mike Hosking, happy days. The political panel all-stars up shortly, whānau, but first, this week's one-on-one and 10 with co-leader of the Greens, Chlöe Swarbrick. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Kia ora, Bomber. How are you?
Good, my friend. Chloe, let's get into it. The government is looking at new laws to arrest the homeless, seeing as every single homelessness agency warned this government that their changes to the emergency housing thresholds last year would result in an explosion of homelessness, which we are now all witnessing. Isn't it a tad on the nose to solve the homelessness crisis they made by arresting the homeless?
Yeah, look, Bomber, at the end of last year, we had the adjournment speech for Parliament, and I could not bring myself to engage in the regular convention of doing a funny speech. This was off the back of, obviously, a kind of death by 1,000 tax cuts agenda from this government, where they had shredded the social safety net and, as you say, had made these very intentional decisions to create more homelessness. Because I don't know what else you're supposed to call it other than intentional when you're forewarned not only by those social service providers that you're talking about, but also by your own officials that this is going to be the consequences of your actions. You decide to go ahead with those actions, and we see those consequences play out. So as the MP for Auckland Central, you know, this has been part and parcel of a huge amount of my work responding to the homelessness crisis, which the government has fanned the flames of. Now, as you've just spoken about, we saw last week, but actually the week before that, we started getting wind from social service providers that this idea was being socialised by a group of ministers led by Auckland Minister Simeon Brown. Off the back of that, we did a huge amount of digging and found that, as we now know in the public arena, this is indeed the case. So what I've been doing over the past week or so is working with those housing and social service providers, because I desperately believe, to your point around the Fourth Estate, that we need to break this nonsense binary whereby we seem to be fighting, on the one hand, the government saying, well, we want to criminalise homelessness, and, you know, on the other side, people going, no, don't do that. We instead need to be putting forward the clear solutions, which of course look like investing in public housing and housing first, and in the wraparound support services necessary to keep people in homes. Because as I think you've just kind of articulated abundantly clearly in your introductory remarks there, Bomber, the solution to homelessness is homes.
Heather du Plessis-Allen wrote a column on homelessness over the weekend, and all it was missing was a coat made of 101 Dalmatians. Her issue was she can't breeze along K Road to buy milk anymore because of the yucky homeless people. Shouldn't those who elected this government be confronted by the poverty and misery that their government has manifested?
I think that this is where we end up in the really torrid and awful circumstances that we're in at the moment, right? Where we are confronted with, as you say, the consequences of the intentional decisions that the government has made to increase poverty, to increase climate changing emissions, and very clearly to increase homelessness. And now they are saying that, and whipping up all of this hysteria, that supposedly the only responses available to them are to move those who are experiencing homelessness along, i.e. for the problem to crop up in another place entirely. That just shifts the problem. It does not actually deal with the problem. So look, my beef is not with Heather du Plessis-Allen or any other talkback radio host. My beef is not with anybody who is concerned about or confronted with these issues. My beef is with the government that has intentionally made these decisions to make these issues far worse. And I would say that anybody who is confronted by these issues should be engaged in helping to meaningfully try and resolve them, because we live in a society and it requires all of us to engage in our politics and in our democracy to get these solutions, because clearly if we leave politics to the politicians, we'll get what we've always got, and things are circling the drain.
Preach. The economy is melting down and the government wants to sell assets. Isn't this an admission that their economic austerity of underfunding services while borrowing for tax cuts, landlord loopholes, tobacco subsidies, gas and oil subsidies, and Michelin star programs an utter failure? Apparently, allowing overseas millionaires to buy $5 million mansions won't save the New Zealand economy after all.
I mean, it would be an admission if they were able to follow the logical track of the consequences of their own decisions. And again, as we know, many economists forewarned that if you are to whittle away investment in our public services and the innovation, the research and the talent that is necessary to actually grow the economy, well, you're not going to end up with that growth that you say that you care about so much. I would just hark here back to, I believe it was October 2024, so last year, more than a year ago. I actually asked the Prime Minister in question time directly about this because we could see that something was afoot. At that point in time, we hadn't yet seen the moves towards the partial sell-off of Kiwibank offshore and the moves for it potentially to be opened up to offshore, we hadn't yet seen, the statements around the potential privatisation of the Inter-Islander and otherwise. But at that point in time, I asked the Prime Minister whether the government had any plans to privatise our public services, including the likes of state-owned enterprises and otherwise. He called me a conspiracy theorist.
That's right.
Then at the beginning of this year, off the back of a speech by one of his co-deputy prime ministers championing the sell-off of state assets, the Prime Minister then moved to start softening his language. I then called that out in the media, and the Prime Minister once again sought to say, don't worry, nothing to see here. And here we are, more than a year later, where the Prime Minister is now openly talking about how we need to have a supposed mature debate around asset sell-off. So, Bomber, the only conclusion that I can really come to in this is either that the Prime Minister didn't know where his own logic was taking him, or he was being dishonest with the New Zealand public.
Yes.
And I think both of those things are pretty bloody inexcusable for somebody who wants to occupy the ninth floor of the Beehive.
Can we just get it straight from you? What is the Green Party position on selling public assets?
No, we should be investing in our public assets. And I think, you addressed it just before, partially in your question, Bomber. The government has done the austerity playbook, whereby you defund public services to failure, you watch them fail, you point out the failure to the public, and then you say that it's a matter of public ownership and management that is the problem. So then we have to sell it off, which then obviously, as we well know, results in those base services still having to be delivered, but all New Zealanders paying for the additional cost on top that is the profit
margin
for that private provision,
yeah.
which increases the cost of living for New Zealanders. So again, the Green Party very strongly believes in public ownership of our public assets.
Yes.
And we actually believe in a public service that is capable of and resourced to deliver the services that New Zealanders expect and deserve.
Amen. Comrade, COP30 is currently on in Brazil, and I seem to get more cynical about how greenwashed it gets every year. Yeah, last year's COP29 in Azerbaijan was a petro-state farce. Has our global response to climate change been hijacked by the polluters?
So there's a number of different ways to go about trying to unpack this. The first thing that needs to be said is that climate change is here. Climate change is real. Climate change is occurring right now. As the Honourable James Shaw said, we're no longer living in a situation whereby we're talking about climate change as something that will impact future generations. We are living in the age of consequences. Yeah. I recall back when the Auckland anniversary floods hit, 2, 3 or so years ago now. And after having spent years and years and years trying to rationalize and have these supposedly informed political debates around climate change, the need for us to all act, we were all of a sudden helping people rip up their carpets and their curtains and their livelihoods and grappling with the real world reality of the climate crisis. Yeah. And it blows my mind how within the space of only a few months, that seemed to have left the public consciousness. So I guess regardless of all of the lobbying and all of the protection of interests that you've been alluding to, the reality is that we have to deal with the climate crisis much like we have to deal with the reality of the existence of gravity. Yes. What that brings us down to is the things that we actually have control over. Yes. And this is where it needs to be made crystal clear that under the Paris Agreement, out to 2030 in our nationally determined contributions, we as a country are liable potentially to pay other countries to reduce their emission to the tune of billions and billions of dollars if our government refuses to do that work here at home. Yeah. And so far in this term of government, we have seen the shredding of climate policies, which has taken us so far backwards that it's kind of impossible to compute. So that's actually where I get some sense of hope from talking to recently elected local government representatives all across the country who have made it crystal clear to me that regardless of whatever the government's doing, they're getting on with the work, because good climate action also looks like reducing the cost of living and improving people's quality of life at a local level.
There seems to be a terrible disconnect between this government's methane targets and removing Climate Commission oversight. with the extreme weather events hitting New Zealand. Is this a climate denial government? How do you fight back on that?
Two different questions. Is this a climate denying government? Well, yes. I mean, any form of climate delay at this point is a form of climate denial. When it comes to, how we fight that, I think we have to grapple with the reality that it is really hard to get people to care about the end of the world, that is the existential crisis of climate change, if they can't put food on the table for the end of the week.
Totally.
And this is why I, as Green Party co-leader, have been abundantly clear about the need for us to connect just transition policy, that is anything that moves us towards a climate and sustainable and resilient economy, with ensuring that people have good jobs, roofs over their head, and decent income.
Right.
So this is where, again, our whole of economy approach has to take into account the well-being of both people and the planet.
We have all been bewildered by the self-mutilation inside Te Pāti Māori, especially those of us who tried to do the MMP math to get us to 51%. Two questions. First, can the Greens work with whatever Māori Party limps out of this self-sabotage? And two, could the Greens realistically prop up a Labour New Zealand First government if Te Pāti Māori falters and loses its electoral advantage?
Oh, bummer. I think we're getting a bit of ahead of ourselves with that second
I want
question.
that election so bad, Chloe. I want that election so bad.
Yeah, I know. And I was actually just saying to the Honourable Chris Finlayson before we came on air that I'm interested not only in a change of government, but in a government of change.
Yes.
And, I've worked with Te Pāti Māori in the last 5 years, both obviously in last term when they returned and then for the, swathe of this term as well. And what I do know is that there is all of those people, all of those MPs are dedicated to the kaupapa. I need to be clear with you that I actually don't understand and am not across, do not have all of the information as to what's transpired internally.
I don't think anyone is. I don't think anyone is.
That we're currently seeing. But I really, really, really hope that they sort it out, because we need them to. And that is the clarion call, that is the call that we have heard from across the country.
Finally,
as to the second part of your question around, New Zealand First and their role.
Yes.
Look, I strongly believe and always have believed that the power in this country belongs to the people of this country.
Yes.
So that is why I am in the Green Party, because I don't believe in the lockstep kind of duopoly that has been the two legacy parties of Labour and National dominating our political landscape in such a way that so clearly has not delivered for New Zealanders, let alone for the last 40 years. So, I just make the point that if New Zealanders want a lower cost of living, if they want an increased quality of life and lower climate changing emissions, then they know where to cast their vote, and it's with the Greens.
Thank you, comrade. We'll talk to you again soon. Have a great night.
You got it, mate. See ya.
Cheers, Chloe. Okay, now to our political panel all-stars. Our first panellist is a former Labour Party leader, former Auckland mayor, and former New Zealand High Commissioner to the UK. That's enough formers to become a perpetual rear-view mirror. From the House of Gryffindor, one of the few true free speech champions left in New Zealand, the Honourable Phil Goff. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Oh, the week, it's going to be wet. There's lots of problems out there. A few things to celebrate on the sporting field over the weekend.
Preach.
Hey, go the Kiwis, and let's see how the All Blacks go on Saturday. But spring is in the air, apart from the rain this week, and we're all looking for a better year next year.
Rebirth. Our next panellist is the coolest Gen X journalist in New Zealand. Forget Mikey Havoc, forget Russell Brown, forget Noel McCarthy. The greatest was always Auckland business editor for The Post, Dita De Boni. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martyn.
One word to describe the week, please, ma'am.
It's two words, tongariro and fireys. Now, the fireys, they do complain a lot and they like to take their keks off, but they need more money. They need more money and they need proper conditions, don't they?
They do.
And this shows you why.
Our next panellist has the acerbic wit of Sir Michael Cullen and the terrifying intellect of Helen Clark, a National Party cabinet minister when being such a thing had some actual mana. He has the same redemption arc as Darth Vader, formerly Attorney General KC and former Minister for Treaty of Waitangi negotiations, the Honourable Christopher Francis Finlayson. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, great son of Lennon. How are you?
I am fantastic. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Well, total lack of belief, really. I flew from Rotorua to Wellington today. The plane didn't break down, the wings never fell off, and I landed 17 minutes early. My strike rate with Wellington to Rotorua and back is about 50%. So something's looking up if Air New Zealand can get me from Rotorua to Wellington in 17 minutes.
And last but certainly not
No,
least.
not in 17 minutes. 17 minutes early, I hasten to add. They're not that good.
Okay. Last but not least, he is the Māori for all seasons, a political commentator, raconteur and broadcaster at the Mighty Wātia Network, media mogul, people's hero and talkback host, Matthew Tukaki. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please,
Well,
sir.
I miss shock jock, so...
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I come from the John Laws School of Broadcasting, so
Yes.
there we go. No, look, climate change
Yes.
is a big issue for me. Gro Brundtland, the former Prime Minister of Norway, released a report back in 1987 where she talked about the 3 pillars of sustainable development. And I, as somebody who has led a delegation to Rio Plus 20 all the way back in 2012, I feel for all these young people going there wanting to dream big and change the world and te mea. But you cannot have a response to climate change without the 3 pillars of sustainable development moving as one. And the pillars are social, economic and environmental pillars. One doesn't work without the other.
Sure.
And I'm hoping that Muhammad Yunus will find time to impart some wisdom, as he did back in 2012, and show all these young people how it's done.
Brothers and sisters, let's get into tonight's show. Issue 1, is making the homeless more homeless a solution as the economy melts down? Issue 2, new anti-meth policy. Will it work? Issue 3, Cook Islands versus New Zealand versus China versus drones. Who is winning? And issue 4 tonight, Te Pāti Māori dramas versus Labour Party needs for stability. Are the political right laughing all their way to the ballot box? Plus, we'll have a final word at the end of the show where each panellist gets to go to the mountaintop to see who breaches broadcasting standards this week. My money is on Dita. Comrades, let's get into tonight's show with issue 1. The government is so embarrassed by the explosion of homelessness generated by their policies that they are now looking to make it illegal to be homeless. Dita, you are a business journalist. Unemployment reached a 9-year high of 5.3%. It's 10.5% for Māori, 12.1% for Pacifica, and 15.2% for 15 to 24-year-olds, while an increasing number of disillusioned job seekers are opting out of joining the workforce altogether. How will making homelessness illegal make those stats better?
I mean, obviously it won't, but I do think I covered the election of Brown, Wayne Brown, when he was against Viv Beck and people like that all the way back then. And she said to me, we have a good system going at the moment, a wraparound system of people who are homeless. We know all the homeless people in Auckland and we target them. And he came in saying that he was going to slash those programs.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened. And now when I read this material, I tend to think that he was doing that to shove it off onto central government. And this central government's just not, they don't really care about this particular issue. So it's a recipe for disaster. As we all know, if Queen Street isn't working, the economy isn't working. So, and it's something that Wayne Brown has to jump in, all boots and all, and I'm sure Phil will understand that better than me.
Phil, you are a former Auckland mayor. This government cut back homelessness outreach. They changed emergency housing rules that kicked out thousands, and they cut back on food banks. What did they expect to happen?
Yeah, all of those are part of it. There is a solution to homelessness and to rough sleepers on Queen Street, and it's called Housing First, and that was the policy that I endorsed as mayor.
Yes.
And we put support behind the Auckland City Mission and the construction of home ground.
That's right.
The reopening of the Bishop Liston Hostel. During COVID, we provided meals for those that were on the streets. In fact, during COVID, we got all but 20 people off the streets in Auckland. All but 20.
So it can be done.
So it can be done. What Housing First does, for those listeners that might not be familiar with it, is it says, usually with people who are rough sleepers, there are factors that lead to that, and they're often mental illness or a drug or alcohol addiction.
Sure.
You cannot solve those problems while people are on the street. The first thing you've got to do is put them in a home, but that's not enough by itself. Secondly, you've got to put a wraparound service around them and address the causes. Now, Housing First has housed several thousand people, and it's track record, very difficult people. Most private landlords wouldn't want to take the people that are homeless. They've got about a 90% stable occupancy of tenancy rate.
Wow.
And that's fantastic. So you've got a solution. Now you've got to have a commitment and the resources that back it up.
Yeah.
But, moving people on, there's no point in that if you're just moving them on to another place. So you can move them off Queen Street, but then you'll find that they're on a back street, or they're in Newmarket, or they're in a suburban area.
Yeah.
And, it is a real problem. And the way you resolve that problem is make sure that you've got affordable housing available and a wraparound service to help people with the problems that have rendered them homeless.
Chris, shouldn't we all be forced to confront the social carnage of homelessness? Isn't that our obligation? If we underfund mental health and poverty initiatives, it should be in our face, shouldn't it?
Oh, I don't disagree with that, but I think there are two issues here. One is, should people be lying around the streets? The answer is no. I agree with Phil. If they're simply moved off Queen Street, they'll end up in Herne Bay, which would be quite funny, really. Or they'd end up in the suburbs. And Greg O'Connor, the Member of Parliament for the now defunct electorate of Aotearoa, said to me, already you can see it in Wellington, that there are people who are living rough in Newlands, which is a suburb of Wellington to the north. But I actually don't believe that local government or central government have ultimate responsibility for this. I think it's you and me, Bomber.
Yeah.
We as individuals have to look after people and make sure that the right organisations are properly funded so they can help them. I mean, the Auckland City Mission does a great job. Catholic Social Service. I know it's fashionable to bag religion, but I actually think these agencies do a really good job, the Salvation Army and the Methodists and so on. So I think that the wealthy people of the rich suburbs of Auckland, no point lamenting the fact that people are lying around Queen Street. If they're going to be moved on, they're going to have to dig into their pockets and actually make sure that these people are looked after, because we have an obligation to one another as fellow human beings.
Excellent point. Thank you. Matthew, the most concerning part of these plans is that they are looking to empower security guards with the powers to physically force the homeless along and arrest them. Shouldn't the police be the only ones to be trusted with those powers?
I think using the word trust and the word police.
Bad point.
It's a very bad point, given the fact that Andy Costa's just been stood down.
Yes.
Look, I mean, homelessness needs to be reset in our psychology. Homelessness is not just about people living rough on the bottom of Queen Street. And I was talking to Helen Robinson from the Auckland City Mission the other day about this. Homelessness is in every suburb around the central city of Auckland now. Now, where I live, in a very well-to-do suburb, not Herne Bay, I might say, there is homelessness. But they're not homeless people because they're unemployed or with mental health problems. These are the working poor of our citizenry who cannot afford to live in Auckland. They're living in their cars. So if you go up to the Western Springs Park up here at Point Jubilee, you'll see them. If you go down the boat ramp, you'll see them. If you go across to Mission Bay, you'll see them. We sometimes think that they're, just, what do you call those tourist people?
Tourists?
Freedom campers. They're not freedom campers. I can't stand them, quite frankly, hanging around my suburb like blowflies.
But it's people in poverty living in cars,
people in poverty living in cars. And it's not just here in Auckland or Queen Street. It's everywhere. Wairoa. You go down to Wairoa. About now, as we come into summer, people are homeless in Wairoa still. But, the other thing too is I think it's the failure of the government, of Christopher Luxon in particular, to read the room. Failure to act. I mean, at the time that he's going and getting rates relief on his holiday home on Waiheke Island, I mean, or dressing up and putting red band gumboots on in a navy blue suit, saying I support Gumboot Friday, only for Winston to come out and correct him once again. It's failure of leadership on this, on not just this issue. The problem that I have with all of this is leadership. I actually agree with Chris.
Yep.
I do think more of us should do more of the heavy lifting. I think we should invest more in organisations like the Auckland City Mission, the City Mission of Murray down in Wellington and Christchurch and all of these different places. Our Māori organisations, I'd love to see more opening up to support kaumātua housing around our urban marae. All of these different things have meaning, but it is a failure of leadership.
Yeah. The government would like that to happen, I think. They want to shift these things off to churches and whatnot.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 2 tonight, and the government have finally announced their response to soaring meth use with a $30 million project that includes new powers for organised crime, more money for rehabilitation, and a focus on marine surveillance. Will it be enough? Fell for almost a decade. I've been blogging about the impact of the 501s on the domestic organised criminal landscape in New Zealand. While politicians of every hue have claimed our gangs were the worst, turns out that they were horribly wrong, because the 501 syndicates have brought a level of criminal sophistication and uber violence from the Australian underworld that has seen murders and standover tactics by the 501 syndicates as they have moved to take over the meth trade. Has New Zealand horribly dropped the ball on the new realities of organised crime?
Yeah, well, this is very personal to me because while I was in London, the property manager in Clevedon let my house out to gang associates of the 501s. The consequence was $160,000 worth of damage.
Oh my God!
The meth level was at 200. The safe level is 1.5. They had kids living in the house, which is the thing that really appalls me.
Jeez,
What's the future of those poor kids? And when we were pulling everything out, as we had to, or my sons were, who are tradies, better at it than I am, they found the shower waste stuffed full of 45 caliber pistol bullets.
Wow!
So, now I'm faced with the prospect of having to take legal action for an incompetent property manager who did no due diligence in the nature of the people they put in.
Check?
No, if they had, my son, once we found out the name of the tenant, found out in 2 minutes that she had just been evicted from her previous tenancy for running a meth lab.
Sounds like an episode of Lock, Stock and Smoking Barrel.
Yeah. It's so. I mean, it's but I do think of the young kids that were in that house because their future is buggered before their lives even get underway. Look, there's 2 aspects. First of all, meth use in New Zealand doubled last year. That is serious. We've got a meth problem like almost no other country in the world does.
Yes.
And meth is particularly bad. It's the same drug that the Germans used for their SS troops during the Second World War to keep them awake and make them aggressive.
Yes.
So if you look at a lot of the violent crime around, you can associate it with people that are taking meth. There's 2 ways of dealing with it. One is to tackle the supply, and the second is demand. Now, the TV's full of shows of we've confiscated this and we've confiscated that, and customs and police are probably doing the best job they can. But the fact is, best practice in the world shows that you only interdict 20% of the total supply. So for every big shipment that we intercept, there's 5 times as much coming in that they don't. So therefore, look at the other side, and that is demand. And what we've got to do, I welcome this package. It's a good step in the right direction, in my view.
Sure.
I'm not here just to criticise the government for everything.
That's my job.
Yeah. And the way that they've come to this is they set up a working group which had people like Jared Gilbert on it.
That's right.
He knows everything there is about gangs. And they came up with really good recommendations, and the government's adopted some of them. But it is about getting people that are addicted to it, that then, it's really expensive to, when you're an addict, you've either got to go to crime, go to prostitution, or as they were doing in my house, manufacturing it themselves.
Yeah.
So the addiction and mental health services are critical in this. The doing more for the interdiction is also important, and setting standards, because there were very uncertain standards. Landlords, our property manager said, when we found out that they were using meth, just go in there with a bit of sand soap and you can clean it out. Well, this the decontamination process strips everything. The paint, you rip out the doors, you rip out everything that's electrical. So having those standards by which landlords have to comply to keep it safe for the next tenant that might come along unsuspecting and find that their rental property has been badly contaminated is really important. So steps in the right direction, but we need to do a lot more.
Chris, the 501s use counterintelligence tactics adopted from South American cartels, and they sell a cheaper, purer meth than the domestic gangs can sell. What's new now, though, is the Chinese shadow banking infrastructure that allows syndicates to pay for drugs directly from cartels. Is the reality about the new FBI base in Wellington an acknowledgement that we are out of our depth here and need FBI expertise to track these new criminal infrastructures?
Oh, gee, I've got no real insight into that. I was very impressed with what Phil said. Basically, there's no point locking people up for using meth. So the wraparound welfare services are what's required, but coming down brutally on those who supply it. And I agree with Phil. I do think it's a step in the right direction, but I'm not avoiding your answer, Bomber. I just don't know the reason for the FBI setting up that office, and I would just be waffling if I endeavoured to give you an answer.
Bless you for your honesty. Matthew, the government are committing to $30 million over 4 years to tackle the meth. Of that, around $2.5 million per year will be spent on rehabilitation. We currently spend $235 million per year on addiction, and it costs $18,000 for a 30-day rehab. We know meth addiction can take up to 12 months. Is this $2.5 million enough to protect whānau and community from the carnage of meth?
Yeah, look, I think three things. Number one, it is a step in the right direction. So, you know, a bouquet, not a brickbat to the government for going down the path. The second thing, I was talking to Maria Baker, who runs Ngāti Hini Health up in the north, and we had her on the radio this morning, and she laments that actually there is very little in terms of wraparound services in the north.
Yeah.
And so that's both prevention and post-pension work. So the investment needs to be there. Is $30 million enough, or 2.5 here, a little there? No, it's investment in infrastructure, it's investment in workforce. Those sorts of things take time. But we've got to also ensure that whatever this government does on methamphetamine is carried through to whoever the next government may be, at least for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
Second thing is I would like to see, and I'm on the record of saying this, I would like to see more investment in intelligence gathering on breaking the supply chain through the Pacific. I think that's fundamentally important. I do think something's happening in Tonga to enable that. There was another announcement that the government made the other day about setting up a dog handler base in Tonga, because methamphetamine also in Fiji is out of control.
Yes.
And just as 501s are being deported back here, they're also being deported back to the Pacific.
Totally.
So we can't be isolationist in our thinking here. We've got to think a little bit more broadly. Third thing is post-pension. The post-pension activity is all about prevention as well, about helping and supporting people as a society back into becoming productive members of society. I do not believe that just users by and of themselves are the issue. In fact, we shouldn't see them as an issue other than to support them back into being productive members of society. I think we give them a bad rap. And it's not all about the 501s, and we cannot get away from the supply chain, much of it still occurring out of Southeast China, and China North.
Yeah.
We've got to push back on the Chinese here.
Dita, a point of meth in America costs $5. In New Zealand, it's $100. That level of profit margin is a supply and demand equation you can't break, isn't it?
The fact that we have a cost of living crisis and meth addiction has gone up suggests that, I mean, it is a disease of hopelessness, isn't it? This kind of addiction.
Yeah.
And so wraparound services, are badly needed, like they're needed in almost every area of health, mental health and everything else. I would agree with what Matthew's saying about and this sort of bleeds into your next issue, but it's the Chinese, US, New Zealand Australian cooperation.
Yeah.
I believe, there could be a concerted effort to do something in the Pacific, because it obviously sounds like, for example, Fiji is a really disastrous area.
Yes.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 3 tonight, and that is the ongoing friction between the Cook Islands and New Zealand as a realm of New Zealand cozies up with China and Winston cuts millions in Cook Island aid. Chris, didn't New Zealand screw this up right royally in 2023 when we allowed the bloody Americans to open embassies in the Cook Island and Niue without talking to us first? And wasn't the free association lesson taken by the Cook Islands of the Americans pushing past us that they could also allow China to do the same?
Oh, probably, but I mean, the reality of the matter is New Zealand has not treated the Pacific particularly well for many years. The Cook Islands are an example of that. I don't like what Peters is doing, by the way. I think we've always treated the Samoans badly, and Manawa Nui is the best example of that in recent times. So basically, if they're telling us to go and visit a taxidermist, I have great sympathy for them.
God, I love you, Chris. Matthew, if this was truly about Pacific Island independence, we should stand aside and allow the Cooks to be independent. But the fear here is that this is genuine Chinese encroachment into our territory. The recent 3-ship flotilla by China through the Tasman Sea had more firepower in those 3 ships than the entire Australian and New Zealand navies combined. Is Winston right to cut aid?
No. Put simply, no. I think it's a bad move. I think we should be doing more to outreach to our realm countries and also to the Pacific. The Australians have learned a very bad lesson on this one, whereby they have been formally and informally excluded through diplomatic channels in the Pacific now for many years. Anthony Albanese's only started to get them back in the door. And I think that is problematic. Although it's not lost on me that a Chinese research vessel, a survey ship, is now in the Cook Islands.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, in fairness to Winston, not that I'm giving him a bouquet of any level, I think he's doing what we would expect a foreign minister to do, which is to stand up for New Zealand's interests and rights, particularly as it applies to realm countries. Whether he's doing a good job of that or not, well, that's for others to judge. But I think somebody, Bomber, has been caught with their hands in the cookie jar, and I hate to say it like that, but this is a battle between China and resources and getting access to those resources, and however they can get access to them, and that should not be lost on us.
Dita, if we want to strengthen our ties with the Cooks, why not have our national carrier in New Zealand subsidise flights to the Cook Islands for New Zealand holiday makers to boost the tourism and the cultural ties? Why aren't we thinking about ideas like that?
I mean, I agree with you. What I would like to see, and it's a naive and fantastical hope, would be that New Zealand, Australia, the US, China and everyone agree to leave the Cook Islands seabed alone.
Yes.
And build a support package that means that the Cook Islands doesn't have to. I mean, they've already sold their fishing rights to China, I believe.
Yes.
When we were just there, sorry to sound bourgeois, but we were there, and in the waters, the lagoon, there's no fish. There's just a real lack of sea life.
Right.
The Cook Islanders said it themselves, and they said, China's, got fishing rights here, and you can see that. This is what turns people to money, obviously, right. to make money, because if they don't have the fish, they their tourism activities go down. So, it's all interconnected, but it would be lovely to protect the seabed of the Cook Islands, wouldn't it?
Amen. Phil, as High Commissioner, you've been on the receiving end of Winston's anger. Is he right with this funding cut decision on the Cooks?
Well, there's a lot of blame that attaches to Mark Brown in that. The Cook Islands is not an independent country. It's a self-governing country in free association with New Zealand. There are protocols that govern that,
yes.
And one of them is that they have to consult New Zealand on issues of foreign policy and defence. They didn't. They were dishonest about it. They weren't transparent about it, and they're reaping the consequences of that. So to that extent, there had to be some action taken against the Cook Islands. If the Cook Islands wants to have a relationship with China, give up the current status, become independent.
Sure.
And that means give away your New Zealand citizenship.
Yeah.
And no Cook Islander wants to do that.
Yeah.
If you really wanted to be tough on the Cook Islands, you'd say, take your choice now. become totally independent, make all your own decisions then, become a member of the Commonwealth, the United Nations, have your relationship. The biggest embassy in the Cook Islands will be a Chinese one. Sell your soul, take the cheap loans that are not really cheap, allow them to come and do the development, which is half-baked, and let them ravish your seabed. If you don't want to do that, then you've got to follow the rules that your country and our country jointly agreed on.
Right.
Now, my worry about Winston on this is that he doesn't have Plan B.
Yeah.
At the moment, China can outbid New Zealand anytime it wants to on aid.
Right.
You know, we think we're doing a lot, $30 million in aid. The Chinese can double that, treble
Chump
it.
change. Chump change.
And look, I'm cynical about China as I am about any superpower.
Yes.
They're there for their own purposes, and they are commercial, as Matthew's pointed out. They're also defence. They would love to have a seaport in the South Pacific.
Totally.
And they will support any elite in the Pacific that is pro the mainland China.
Right.
And they don't care about any ethics. They'll support the ratbags in Solomon Islands. They won't give a damn about that and about how corrupt they are, as long as they are their people.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to defend China's actions in it, but I think we've really dropped the ball. If this little country, 13,000 people, it's the same size as Oamaru or Richmond, this little country that has all of these ties with New Zealand, 60,000 Cook Islanders in New Zealand, and somehow we've allowed it to deteriorate to this position.
Yeah.
Now, that's a reflection on a failure of New Zealand foreign policy. And what I want to know from Winston is, okay, if Mark Brown gets re-elected next year, what's your plan B?
Right.
How are you going to find a solution to this? Because I can't see them putting any solution up. They're being tough, but not really tough enough to make a big difference. And they are not doing the groundwork that they needed to do to capture the hearts and minds of the decision makers in the Cook Islands that all have New Zealand connections, that all enjoy their New Zealand citizenship. There is no reason why it should have deteriorated to this point, but it has.
Quick round to you all. Drones have been touted as a must-have to patrol and protect New Zealand's massive economic zone. Should we create our own domestic drone industry? Chris?
Well, I don't know that we need to develop an industry, but it does make sense that we need to use them. But why develop an industry, Bomber? It seems all a bit rather pointless.
Matthew?
The industry is already here.
Yep.
I say we invest in what we've got. I'd like to see it become part of our manufacturing base, to be frank. I do think New Zealand needs to grow and build its industrial machine, and I see that sort of technology, kind of like Fisher and Paykel and CT scanning machines have become world leading and world class. So I think there's an opportunity, and I say we go for it.
Dita?
Probably the alternative is Israeli drones.
I'm not sure I want those.
So let's keep it
Phil?
in-house.
Yeah,
Phil?
we already have the industry. We've
Right.
got a group called SIOS. They did a £60 million contract with the British Ministry of Defence to provide large drones to the British Defence Force while I was High Commissioner there.
Yep.
Drones are really good. I mean, really good or really bad, actually. They're an inevitable part of the Defence Force now. They're cheaper than anything else.
Yes.
Just look at Ukraine has changed. The war in Ukraine has changed the way we do things.
Right.
But drones are also really good. We've spent a lot of money on the P8 Poseidons.
Yes.
But drones can pretty much do a lot of what they do
Yes,
at a
right.
fraction of the price.
Yes,
And
yes.
they can cover a lot more ground.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm with Matthew. Go for the areas where the fastest growing export of New Zealanders to the United Kingdom is technological.
Right.
We put ourselves down. Dairy's growing and meat's growing because of the free trade agreement until the climate change thing stuffs that up and our government's lack of commitment to it, to doing anything about it. But those are the areas where we have that skill, like Rocket Lab, where we need to be investing and making New Zealand a wealthy first world country, which we will do not through agriculture but through technology.
Can I just
go for it.
just add to that?
Yeah, I feel so inadequate after my answer. I do apologize.
There is a fantastic legacy New Zealand company, although it's been absorbed by somebody else now, called Tate Electronics out of Christchurch, Saranga State. I think it was the founder. And they have been creating world-class, sophisticated gear, if you like, for decades.
Yeah.
So these beautiful little...
I opened their office in Vienna.
There you go.
Oh, there you go.
And they run London Transport Comms system.
They're great.
Yeah.
I mean, why can't we invest in those sorts of companies rather than keeping on bloody cows and
As you
pine
were.
trees.
Finally tonight, the bewildering self-sabotage and self-mutilation of Te Pāti Māori is a gasp-inducing, heads held in hands, cavalcade of own goals that is as shocking as it is impossible to stop watching. It's not just a train wreck. It's a train carrying toxic chemicals colliding with a full school bus that explodes into a pet shop for disabled kittens. Matthew, Debbie, Rawiri and JT are being portrayed as the bad guys here, yet it was Doc and Maramino who were plotting a coup against Debbie and Rawiri back in July for ostensibly being not tikanga enough. What the bloody hell happens now?
Well, look, as a very good Australian operative, we call this the killing season. It's when Howard was rolled by Abbott. Howard lost the election. Abbott was rolled by Turnbull. Gillard gets rolled by Rudd. Rudd gets rolled by Gillard. It's killing season.
Yes.
New Zealand just needs to accept that sometimes political parties have a bad day, a bad week, or a bad month. In this case, Te Pāti Māori. Look, the truth is, Martyn and Doc, they didn't have the numbers, didn't work out. We all know John Tamahiri is a serial number taker. No love lost between John and I can tell you that much. So, you know, the fact of the matter is they didn't have the numbers. I'm glad to see they've got it all out in the public domain ahead of Christmas, because I think the real story in town is what the backbench of the National Party is going to do to their leader.
Oh, you're such a little bitch, Dita. There's an old Māori proverb. It's all tikanga until the lawyers get involved. What do you make of this?
Really, to be honest, I think a lot of it is a beat up, because a lot of political parties go through these things. I think it's very similar. It's a relatively new party. It's had a complete evolution at the top of leadership. It is going in a more strident direction, perhaps. This is bound to cause some friction. It's disappointing from a progressive perspective, because we'd like everyone to be working together and get the numbers, obviously. But I think a lot of people are sort of rubbing their hands, and maybe Nationalists kind of stoking this because it takes
Phil, have you ever seen anything like this before?
The truth is that both the accusations made by both parts of the Maori Party against the other are all accurate. Tamahiri is acting in a dictatorial way. I know John well, as Matthew does, and we know that the accusations being made against him are absolutely right. But when I see what Eru Kapa Kingi did to the security people in Parliament, that's like, who was that National MP that said, "Don't you know who I am?" That's a really
Aaron
bad
Gilmore.
sign. Gary Gilmore, thank you, Chris. Likewise, I mean, the overspending that's going to come out of the Maori Party budget anyway.
Yep.
But look, when you sack a third of your parliamentary representation, you've got a real problem. And the Maori electorate, just from what I've seen and heard from people that are part of that, are saying there are all these critical issues out there that you should be fighting on our behalf, and you're fighting against your bloody selves. Yeah. Now, that's a sure way of committing political suicide. Yeah. So, the Nats actually are probably happy about it, but they're a little bit worried, because if the Maori Party collapses, the key argument they've got against the alternative coalition is ended. You can hear what the Nats are going to do now. Vote Labour and get Te Pāti Māori.
Yes.
And so, that might come around and bite them. If that vote is redistributed amongst Labour and the Greens, it probably wouldn't make too much difference, other than there is an overhang.
Chris, David Seymour, Don Brash, Sean Plunkett and Mike Hosking are crying tears of joy. Are the right laughing all the way to the ballot box?
I wouldn't have thought so. It's going to be very interesting. I mean, I would have thought Te Tai Tonga was going to go back, because Mahara lost it. My old buddy Mahara lost it in 2008, but Reno got it in 2011. I think it's a pretty strong Labour seat, so that'll go back. I would have thought Te Tai Tokara the same. So, in fact, I never really knew how that one was lost. So I would have thought that the overhang, if the Maori Party goes, is reduced. There could be no overhang.
That's right.
And then you've got the Labour Party picking up a couple of those electorate seats. I don't think Waiariki and Te Tai Hararu would necessarily go back to Labour, at least not immediately.
Yes.
So I don't think it's very early to tell, but trying to look at it objectively, and I've got no skin in the game, I would have thought it marginally favoured Labour at the present time.
Yes.
And Willie was saying today, well, I like these guys, I know them, but I'm going to go for the throat, and that is exactly what I would expect the Labour Party approach to be next year.
When your enemy is drowning, you throw them an anvil. Comrades, we need to wrap the show with a final word. Chris, your final word this week, please, sir.
Oh, I think I've probably said enough. I'm still in a state of delirium over flying without incident.
I think Air New Zealand should use that as an advert. Matthew, your final word this week, please, sir.
Stupidity. Stupidity from the perspective that I cannot understand for the life of me how the New Zealand police managed to stuff up the entire internal investigation around Javan skimming. What's his name? The
Big Skimmings.
Big Skimmings, sorry. An irrelevant person that no one should also know other than by the stuff up in the investigation and the subsequent charges. But then for the government, from the State Services Commissioner right up to the ministers, also losing sight and now conveniently throwing a former police commissioner to the wall, is more unbelievable. I think it's time we bit the bullet. I personally think there should be an independent standing commission against corruption in this country. Stop playing around with the IPCA nonsense. Put a Royal Commission sort of thing around it, and let's just clean the house up.
Dita, your final word, please.
This is a little bit off topic from New Zealand politics, and it's to do with TikTok, as we've mentioned tonight. And I know we're all very young and hip, but we might not be on.
I still call it TikTok.
But there's that's funny. There's a really popular TikTok going around where a woman rang up 27 churches in America. She's an American woman, and she said, I've got a baby here, the baby's starving, I need some infant formula. 21 churches told her to go F herself, basically, in their response. The ones that said, okay, we'll help you, were the mosque, the black churches, the Church of Satan, and one little Arkansas kind of Church of Paw, who... Then they took a clip of him talking to his congregants, because everyone who said yes got a huge influx of donations, and he couldn't stop crying. And it was just really lovely. But this has become very popular with young people. They've finally gone, oh my God. And I don't think it's a beat up on religion per se. It's a beat up on American style religion and what's happening in the country right now, where people who are proclaiming themselves to be Christians are part of this movement of conservatism, which just turns its back on poor people. So try and check out this TikTok, if you can even get on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but I've seen this clip. It's pretty amazing.
Beautiful. Phil, your final word.
We're here to
please.
save your soul, but your body can go to hell. Bit of shameless self-promotion for Chris Finlayson and I. The latest podcast.
The best podcast I have seen in a long time.
Look at this. Yes. That's the endorsement we want. No, it's great. It's great working with Chris. We come from different political stables.
Yes.
There's a lot we agree on. We're not just over the board partisan either way. We try to bring some rationality to it and look at why these things are happening. But I enjoy doing the show. I think you do, Chris, as well. And it's easy to find. You can get it on Apple Podcasts. You can get it on anywhere you get your podcast, basically. And TikTok. It's
really good. It's really good.
You really have to watch the bonus episode tonight, because it's all about the sacking of Goff Whitlam, which occurred 50 years ago today, Tuesday, 11 November 1975.
A day that will live in infamy.
Really a day that will live in infamy for some. Kerr and Barwick's behaviour was shocking, so it's well worth watching, because Phil and I have given, if I may say so myself, some brilliant insights.
I couldn't have said it better, Chris.
Exactly.
Shameless self-promotion.
Thank you, comrades. And now to my final word. Brothers and sisters, The final evaluation of the government's military-style boot camps found it was too small to provide any meaningful data, and its implementation was rushed, with the majority of those attending re-offending. The left has called it another abject failure, but the success of the military boot camps isn't in whether they work or don't work. Their success is in feeding the resentment of reactionary right-wing voters who are angry at youth offenders. Nothing excites reactionary voters more than the thought of kids they are fearful of being punished in a military boot camp. Oranga Tamariki didn't like the term because after the Royal Inquiry into historic abuse, the previous military boot camps were full of kids who were being abused, and they don't want their brand to be tainted by their resurrection, and they don't want to be held legally culpable either. So, succeeding or failing isn't really the point of the military boot camps. The point is for you to hear the words military boot camps and imagine some teenager you are fearful of getting shouted in the face by a drill sergeant. This is what we is now. This is what we have become. Counterproductive revenge fantasies masquerading as social policy. Burn that cross with pride. In solidarity, the revolution continues. Ka pai Aotearoa.
The Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. The Bradbury Group is an independent podcast through the Rover Network, sponsored by Wātea News.